How about that editorial, Sam? We're waiting on it.
On the fire, Jim. Listen to this. You understand, I'm thinking about those kids out there. You know, Jim, the way things are today, the next generation has got a right to ask just where this country's heading. Here's the way I begin. What makes America great? Is it the rich soil? The good earth of Africa and Russia is just as rich. Is it our natural resources? In China and South America are just as valuable treasures of coal and minerals. Is it our people? Perhaps. But remember that we Americans, or our forefathers, once were aliens who came to this country from other lands. And whether they landed in 1620 or 1820 or 1920, what ideal fired them with the spirit that from the beginning has shaped and formed and guided this republic?
First rate so far, Sam. Go on.
Can't finish it. I don't just seem to know the answer.
Well, Sam, if you don't, I guess nobody does. Your folks have been around these parts for 300 years. Been running this paper for more than 100.
Maybe the answer is right there. If I could only read it.
And seek the answer. Let us look at this land of the free, this America of ours. Suppose we say that it contains three rills, woods and templed hills, lofty mountains that raise their peaks above the plain, the Rockies and the Appalachians, the Adirondacks and the Alleghenies, the Sierra Madres and the Catskills. There are the 5 Great Lakes. There are rushing rivers, the Mississippi and the Missouri, the Ohio and the Columbia, the Susquehanna and the Sacramento, the Potomac and the Delaware, the Hudson and the Arkansas, the Cumberland and the James. Within its borders, the temperature ranges from 40 degrees below zero in the north to 120 degrees above in the south. But it takes more than weather and land to make a country great. It takes more than just space. Why, our good neighbor Brazil is bigger than we are, and so is the Dominion of Canada. On the other side of the world, China is more than 1 million square miles larger than the United States, and Russia is nearly 3 times bigger. No, it can't be the richness of the soil or the bounty of our natural resources. It must be that America was made great by Americans. Yes, we are great because of our people, the little people and the big people, the 135 million of us who make up this mighty nation. The Greeks have a word, demos, that means the people. From it, we get our word democracy, meaning government by the people, freedom. That is what our forefathers wanted. Of course, there are other forms of government, such as plutocracy, meaning government by the plutocrats or the very rich. They didn't want that, and we don't want it either. There's autocracy, government by autocrats or dictators, and we certainly don't want that at any price. And there's bureaucracy, which is government by bureaus or departments, and we're not going to trade democracy for that either, that's sure. No, sir. This country belongs to the people, the American people. From the beginning, we got along pretty well with that system, and we're not going to change it now. We'll stick with the sure thing that gives all of us an equal chance.
Article 1 of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press.
In this democracy, a free press is guaranteed under the Constitution. And we Americans will always resist the enemy who would curtail that freedom. Periodicals and books circulate throughout the country, carrying the stimulating stream of fact and fiction, of comment and opinion, so all may read and thus understand the world they live in.
Article 1 of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to assemble peaceably.
We will fight any enemy that denies to a man or a minority the right to speak according to the dictates of his conscience and his convictions.
In this debate, I'm reminded of a famous sentence that hangs on the wall in my office. It says, "I wholly disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." That's the way it always has been here in America. That's the way it always will be.
Article 1 of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
The Pilgrims who landed on the stern and rock-bound coast of New England in 1620 came in search of religious freedom. They wrote in the compact signed in the cabin of the Mayflower that the perilous journey was undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith. And so steadfast are we today in that same belief that every coin minted by the United States bears this confession of faith. In God we trust. In the day of persecution, when godless enemies would destroy the church and the believer has no place to lay his head, in that day shines more brightly the torch of liberty, a beacon and a blessing, the symbol of freedom. In the short period of 150 years, the average life of an American has almost doubled. Back in the early days, the average lifespan was only 35 years. By the turn of the century, it had increased to 49 years. And by 1940, the average American could look forward to a lifespan of 62 years here in this America of ours, the land of the free. Our youngsters are better fed nowadays. They get more milk, and mothers know about calories and vitamins. We thought that the soldiers of the AEF in the First World War were a husky lot of lads. And 25 years later, our soldiers of the Second World War averaged 2 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier. Along with our increasing knowledge of hygiene and diet have come astounding advances in medicine and surgery. For most of us, the representative of that science is the family physician.
Well, you're much better today.
I'm so glad. And so are you, young lady.
She's just a different child, Doctor. I had no idea that medicine would cure her so quickly.
She'll be up and out of doors by the end of the week. You see, we have to work fast to keep ahead of those pesky bugs. Just think, in my time, I've seen the development of X-ray, radium, insulin for diabetes, and more recently, the sulfur drugs, blood plasma, penicillin, to mention only a few. Then, too, industry is stretching out a helping hand to the handicapped, trying to find jobs for our less fortunate fellows, to help make them self-supporting and to keep them self-respecting. The enemies we fight are always with us, for they're dirt, disease, ignorance, and malnutrition. The battle never ends. There's never an armistice. Well, anyhow, here was an invasion that we licked.
You don't know how grateful we are, Doctor.
One of the bulwarks of the American way of life is the public school, so typical of a democracy. There is no place here for the regimentation that teaches children to hate their neighbors and to strive for a world that they will dominate by force. Here, our American teachers wage war against a cruel and powerful enemy, the enemy of intolerance, whether racial or religious or economic. We have no ruling class in the United States and no lower class because 150 years ago, our forefathers, declaring their independence, made a solemn pledge.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
That all men are created equal.
That they are endowed by their Creator.
That they are endowed by their Creator.
With certain inalienable rights.
with certain inalienable rights,
that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Call it a machine age. Say that we're a nation of realists. We still have time for great music that makes life richer. We have built museums and galleries to house art treasures of all the world. As evidence of a national economy that is both healthy and wealthy, we beautify our cities and towns with inspiring sculpture. To that towering giant of a man, the father of his country, the granite shaft of the Washington Monument is an eloquent, heaven-pointing tribute. In gratitude to the rare soul we know as Abraham Lincoln, this noble fane was erected to hold forever sacred the great heart of the man who gave his life.
That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
There is beauty in our skyscrapers, those vertical cities of stone and steel and glass that have their counterpart nowhere else on earth. There is a clean and efficient beauty in our factory buildings, where so easily are wrought the daily miracles of streamlined production of the world's best manufactured goods. There is beauty in the graceful sweep of a vast stadium, beauty along the shores of our two oceans and the Gulf, and in the vacation lands of the mountains, where the sun is bright, the air is clear, and all nature smiles. There is utility as well as beauty in our bridges that fling their arches across bays and rivers. Among the most majestic structures in our country are the massive barriers of steel and concrete, the dams of the far west that hold back the water and then send it out in life-giving streams that already have made fruitful more than 20 million acres of cropland and will within a few years reclaim 22 million more. But more important to America than any of these is a less imposing structure, the American home. Whether it is a house on a village street, a storied mansion in the South, a farmhouse of the Middle West, a Long Island estate, a gaily colored stucco gem of the Pacific coast, an apartment mid the millions of a big city, still it is sanctuary. Still it is a stake in the country, an investment that pays dividends in thinking and speaking. Yes, and in dreaming in the free air of this land of opportunity. In war and in peace, there is a never-ending battle against the farmer's busy enemies in the insect world. And so successful is this bug bombing that not only do we have more to eat than any other nation on earth, but we grow bounteous surpluses that go to lands across the sea. Take corn, for example, our most valuable crop. The average yield from 1930 to 1940 was 37 bushels per acre. The wide acceptance by the farmers of a good corn hybrid increased the yield in 1942 to an average of 56 bushels per acre. For the entire country, that meant an increase of 629 million bushels. Truly, our cup runneth over. Just as extraordinary and just as gratifying have been other scientific advances. Take eggs. Improving the breed of laying hens has greatly increased egg production. The average hen of 1920 laid 60 eggs a year. By 1930, the number had been increased to 89. And by 1940, the average was 115 eggs, which certainly comes under the head of quantity production. Contour farming and many another innovation in crop rotation, soil analysis and fertilization are widely accepted as means of conserving moisture, reducing soil erosion, and producing bigger and better crops. The years ahead look good to the farmer.
My great-grandfather started this farm, and for 4 generations we've lived our lives here. This is our land, mister. We've paid for it with our labor and our sacrificing. It's free and clear, and we aim to keep it that way.
That's the talk. Keep America free. When you own land, you own a piece of America itself. That's your capital. But there are other ways of owning a part of this country. Did you ever think that every man who buys a bond or who deposits money in a savings account is a capitalist? Money that goes into a bond or a savings account is used by the government or by the bank, and they pay interest for the use of the money. Same way with life insurance. The company puts your money to work and pays you for letting them use it. Money is just paper or metal, unless it does a job. Go back to the early days of our country. Railroads were few, and the trains were slow. The horse tried hard, but he wasn't any too speedy. The first automobiles were faster, but they were noisy, undependable, and expensive. Americans have always wanted to go places in a hurry and in comfort. So the railway engineers, men like Westinghouse and Pullman, went to work. And so did the automobile engineers, men like Haynes and Chrysler. When their plans were made, they needed money for factories and raw materials and workers. And where did they get it? Why, they naturally went to the banker and they borrowed money. Whose money? The money of the capitalists. And who are those capitalists who deposit their money so the bank can put it to work and pay them interest? It's folks like these, folks like us for that matter, who helped and are still helping to build this country. Our taxes, our savings, our money that goes into stocks and bonds, all these add up to the billions invested in our America. And see what happens. With only 7% of the population of the earth, we Americans have built and own nearly 1/3 of all the railroad mileage in the world. And we own more than 3/4 of all the automobiles in the world. They travel over the finest roads on earth, and we in America have built and own half of all the improved highways. That's the kind of faith we have in the pioneers. And when we're in trouble, they come to our help. Automobile manufacturers were making their finest cars in 1941. The country was at peace. But when the threat of war made it necessary to arm America, the automobile makers and all industry plunged into the gigantic task of producing the tanks and trucks and guns and shells to defend our homes against the enemy who struck at us. In your editorial, you might list our vast natural resources. Out of the good earth of our country comes the wealth of precious metals. We own 80% of the world's gold, 60% of the silver, 28% of the copper, 27% of the iron ore, and 26% of the lead. The capacity of our steel mills is 92 million tons a year, and the rest of the world produces only 80 million tons. For all the people on earth, there is an average per person of only 3 acres of land for growing things. But here in the United States, we have nearly 6.5 acres of fertile farmland for every man, woman, and child. Almost twice our requirements for food and clothes. And yet, of the Earth's entire area, we constitute no more than a mere 7%. And of the world's population, Americans make up only 6%. In 1840, a man who was as short-sighted as he was sincere proposed an astounding measure designed to save the country thousands of dollars.
It is obvious, and I am confident all will concur, that we have exhausted our inventiveness. And because there is nothing further for us Americans to devise and patent, no machine nor contraption that could possibly add to our virtue and well-being, I therefore crave your support of a measure to close the patent office.
Close the patent office. And in the next 60 years came inventions that meant jobs for millions of men and women, that meant better living for all the world. each year there are 400,000 applications for patents. Close the patent office? Why, we're just getting started here in America. Benjamin Franklin's discovery of the electric properties of lightning was in itself of little importance. But through the inventive genius of American engineers and the production genius of American management, Franklin's idea was given practical value, and it changed the lives of every person on Earth. To American homes came the doorbell, the washer, the refrigerator, the range, the iron, and many another work-saving household appliance. To the field of communication came the telegraph, the telephone, the radio, radar, and television, all for the enlightenment of mankind by the dissemination of knowledge. To the field of transportation came the trolley car, the automobile, the bus, the truck, and the airplane, all helping to free us from our environment for the easy exchange of goods and ideas with our neighbors. A kite and a key in a thunderstorm. And the world was changed by men of vision and determination, by Americans.
Well, we might as well get out and rest a minute.
Okay, Sarge.
This is pretty country, all right.
Sure is. Folks are mighty nice, too. But somehow they don't seem to have any spunk.
Yeah, everybody's all mixed up over here. Kind of going around in circles.
That's one of the things I like about the good old USA. We're going somewhere in a straight line. And that's still the shortest distance between 2 points. Take that road we just came over. It looks like the people, all mixed up.
Over here, they're always switching around from kings and emperors and czars and to these here dictators and what have you. They can't seem to make up their minds.
That's because some big shot's always making up their minds for them. Everything's all cut and dried. If your father's a baker, then you're a baker. If he's a waiter or a clerk or a carpenter, then that's what you are. Over here, there's no chance to take a chance. Believe you me, Sarge, when I get back home, I'm gonna declare my independence first thing every morning. I'm gonna work wherever I want to, and nobody's gonna tell me different. I'm gonna go to any church I pick out. Nobody's gonna stop me. I'm gonna have my say on every doggone thing that goes on in town, and nobody's gonna shut me up. I'm gonna vote the way I want to, and think the way I want to. I'll probably get married. And if I have a kid, when he grows up, he's gonna pick out the kind of work he wants to do, with no high pressure from me or anybody else. Yep, that's the way it looks to me from this distance. America's on the road, and what a sweet one. Plenty of work to do, plenty of fun when you're through. A road with a nice home on the side of it. Radios and automobiles and fishing trips. Hot dogs and Cokes, and a wife and a kid and your pal. A road as straight as a string. It leads to school, to church, to a good job, with maybe a business of your own someday. That's the kind of a road to travel. Then we'll be going places.
Well, that's what we'd better do right now, go places.
When enemies across the sea strike at our liberty, then there is war. The young men go away to fight for our freedom. And not all of them come back. In times of national stress, we are compelled to abandon many of our hard-won privileges and prerogatives. When boards and bureaus and agencies take away parts of our liberty, we grin and bear it. But when the emergency passes, let us stoutly demand the restoration of our rights. Remember when coffee was scarce and we couldn't have a second cup? Of course we didn't like it. But the coffee shortage wasn't fatal. We lived through it. The big point is this. We gave it up to help win the war, and we got it back. So let it be with all our liberties that must be suspended when our enemies press about us, but must just as surely be restored that the spirit of freedom shall not perish. Liberty is not just a word, not just a statue, not just a slogan. It is a continuing thought, and its price is eternal vigilance. So let us be on guard against the enemies of liberty. Liberty was the flaming banner that sustained and inspired us on the land, at sea, and in the air, on the beaches, in the jungles, on the deserts, in the mountains, in Africa and Italy, in the Aleutians and the Philippines, at Pearl Harbor and Bataan, in Normandy and New Guinea, in Burma and China. There is part of your editorial on what makes America great, Mr. Editor. The rest of it lies right outside your window. Quote figures on natural resources, but remember, still our richest treasures and our greatest assets are the boys and girls of the next generation, the men and women of tomorrow, who must be staunchly on guard if our freedom is to survive. Here is America in miniature. Organizing a ball game is not unlike starting a business. Nobody does it for you. You do it yourself. And nobody tells you that you can't. Of course, there are arguments. That's typically American, too. But eventually, it seems, we reach some sort of working agreement. Perhaps you grant a point to your competitor, and he makes a concession to you. That's good sportsmanship. That's American. Bet I can beat you to second base, and off they go. Competition is congenital in America. We're brought up in the tradition of beating the other fellow, fairly and squarely. In the game of life, every boy has an opportunity to take a swing at the ball. In America, you get a chance to take a chance. The farmer's son may feel the urge to fight the good fight for the freedom of the press. Well, one day the editor's chair will need a new occupant. We're going to need doctors and surgeons to heal our bodies. We're going to need inquiring minds to help keep the patent office open and to make new contributions to science and engineering for the service of all the people. Truly, opportunity in America is limited only by the initiative of the individual. Perhaps one of these boys will be moved to spread the word. In God we trust. We want more architects and painters and musicians to uplift us. We need teachers to keep alive in our youth the principles of freedom. We need women nurses and painters and musicians. And always we need good women who are content to make a career in the noble profession of motherhood. The farms are waiting for young men to till the soil. There's a seat in Congress that's within the power of an American boy or girl to attain. Why, there's even a chair in the White House that the American people give to the man who merits it in the judgment of the electorate. Think of the opportunity that awaits these boys and girls. Each is free to select his chosen field, and each knows in his heart that his life can be what he makes it. Equal opportunity for all. That is the cornerstone of the structure of freedom. Liberty is deep-rooted in all our sacred traditions. It guarantees decent, peaceful living and work well rewarded to all men of goodwill. And it reaches up and up into the light of a better day.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
This is the town of Monroe. There are towns like Monroe in every county in the land, I guess. Places big enough to have a parking problem, and still small enough so you can drop around at the post office at noon, as I do, and pick up your own mail. But we're mean and crafty here in Monroe. At least that's what was meant by an editorial in my boy's college newspaper. We're all corrupt tools of a depraved economy, was the way it was put. That my son Andy was the proud author of this deathless prose startled me a bit. But I figured it's the same with college boy editors as it is with those of us who publish the less enlightened newspapers. We editors covet a reputation for fearless journalism, so we come out occasionally in favor of cattle thieving, the abolition of baseball, or hoisting the red banner up the campus flagpole. Gets us talked about, helps circulation. Still, I was disturbed. I looked at Andy's editorial again, and I realized that someday he'd be running the Gazette. I couldn't tell him what to think, but I wanted to be sure he was thinking. So I wrote him a letter. Wasn't brilliant, went something like this. Dear son and fellow editor, I just got my copy of your editorial describing how you're being squeezed between the dollar sign and the cent sign, how you're suffering under our vicious capitalistic system. I'm touched, both by your predicament and your request for a higher allowance. I can see you now in your dormitory. Now I'll bet you've got another editorial in your typewriter, trying to explain what you meant by the first one, trying to prove that you're Thomas Paine and William Allen White and Andy Gregory all rolled up into one. And I'll bet you're having a tough time doing it. You'll be pleased to know that you come from a long line of outspoken liberals, but you'll probably be shocked to discover that they were practically all capitalists. You know that old flintlock rifle we keep over the mantelpiece? The one I showed you how to handle for the high school history pageant last summer? Well, that rifle belonged to an ancestor of yours. A big businessman, if you will, from Cambridge, Mass. He carried it up Bunker Hill and finally dropped it in his own blood along the Brandywine. He was a liberal, if you want one, a revolutionist, a rebel, like you. But he wasn't fighting against the profit system. He was fighting for his share in it, and his family's, and his country. And there was your great-grandfather. He was considered a barn-burning radical back in the 1850s. That was before he came to Monroe and started the Gazette. He put out abolitionist newspapers in Copperhead communities. His papers, naturally, were never popular, and he was run out of town after town because he was against slave labor and believed in human rights and the dignity of man. Now, I guess that would make him a liberal by any definition. You know, of course, son, that I am a capitalist. No, I don't wear a plug hat or have dollar signs all over my vest, but I own the paper and employ the help, slaves, you'd call them, who labor for the wages they used to buy the things that are advertised in the paper they put out. But advertising is the only space I have for sale. It's my paper. And when Chief Bill Mack comes into the shop, it's usually to give me the latest standings in the Department Bowling League, and not to rewrite my editorial page. You take that kind of free enterprise for granted when you don't have a police state. Speaking of the editorial page, I'm aware of my responsibilities too, just like you liberals. Last month, we got after the Thompson bus people, who seem to think their franchise was a license to steal. I'm not trying to kid you, son, that my squad always wears the pure white jerseys. Catch a man clipping, blow the whistle on him, I say, no matter whose team he's on. Thompson's school buses were traveling death traps. We let the people know it, and they let the town board know it. We got the new buses yesterday. Seems to me your newspaper's all for throwing out the whole capitalistic system just because some capitalists are bad, which would be like old Shorty Stevenson throwing out a whole barrel of apples because he found a couple with worms in them. I don't suppose you were thinking of Stevenson's grocery when you were curling your lip at free enterprise. And he's been serving his community across the counter for 28 years, 6 till 6, 6 days a week, and delivers phone orders after hours. Yes, Shorty's a capitalist, all right, but it'll be a long time before he buys his first yacht. Maybe the supermarket fits your pattern better. That's big business with a board of directors. They're tough competition for the corner grocery because they can buy in bulk, sell cheaper, and display a greater variety. But look at it from the viewpoint of the consumer, whom you call the little man. Come vacation time, you'll be in there for sure, buying all that canned pineapple we have to eat when you're home. That fruit grows in Hawaii. It's raised and canned and picked and shipped 3,000 miles. Then it crosses America by rail and comes here by truck. I guess a lot of people make a profit. But just ask your economics prof how many rubles it would take to buy a can of pineapple that cost you 27 cents. Another thing while I think of it, I noticed that when you're home in this reactionary community, you don't travel much on your poor proletarian feet, although your bourgeois and broken-down old man often does. Unless we happen to be going in the same direction, and I'm lucky enough to hitch a ride in my own car. I must admit, though, you take pretty good care of the old bus. However, it must gall you somewhat to have to deal with the vested interests, like the monster oil industry, where all you have to do is say the magic words, fill her up, and they pump the stuff out of the ground down in Texas, push it 1,000 miles through a pipeline, refine it, ship it up the coast by tanker, truck it to Morse's gas station, and dribble it into your tank. And all for a few cents a gallon, plus tax. Yes, sir, you sure get my money's worth. I guess I threw you a curve that time, Andy. Well, here's a straight pitch. Remember the strike at Tony's coal and lumber yard? You probably had a few friends in that picket line. Ever think what would happen to them if they struck for more wages or less hours in one of those utopias behind the Iron Curtain? Over there, I'm afraid Chief Mack couldn't be neutral. He'd have to liquidate them as enemies of the state. But remember this, free unions are found only where there is free enterprise. Ours is the only system in the world which allows the laboring man, through his union, to regulate his own wages, welfare, and working conditions. Let me put it this way. Where else in the world does a union man drive home from the job in his own car? Speaking of cars, I was down at Al Plank's garage yesterday and saw that new one of ours that you've been hearing about since 1941. I hope your political conscience permits you to drive it, because it's a better sermon on the American system than I can preach. For out of every dollar on the price tag, 75 cents went to labor. And after overhead and taxes, what was left, 7 cents, was profit. 7 cents to the dollar seems like a mighty slim margin for one of your supposedly profit-swollen big industries. But the profit system can be the profit and loss system, too, as the railroad found out not long ago, when its spur line to Kingwood rusted into an expensive right-of-way in a garden of ragweed 25 miles long. And all because the Magruder boys and a couple of their friends came out of the service, got themselves a flock of second-hand and surplus trucks, and proved that they could pick up the farmer's produce right at the barn door and rubber tire it to the main line cheaper and easier than the railroad. So big business had to surrender to free enterprise. You see, our system does work for the little fellow. I remember years ago when Pete Mitchell took over the inn at Middletown. Incidentally, he just put in the Hamiltonian room for the trotting crowd. He started the business serving 2 meals the first day. Now he serves over 12,000 a month. Maybe that's what you mean by predatory capitalism. But to me, it's the realization of that old American dream, independence. Actually, you'll be saddened to find that our town and most towns like it are seething hotbeds of free enterprise. I get around a bit for the paper, and I'm constantly being exposed to the subversive poison of salesmanship. I guess I've bought more trick razors than any of Al Pfeiffer's other customers. I'm also a sucker for his Pipsissewa tonic and trailing arbutus water. But with all the gadgets and notions he sold me, Al has never stung me yet. Incidentally, I seem to recall you're having a good old-fashioned 12 o'clock toothache last summer. Well, Al Pfeiffer, the capitalist who got out of bed in the middle of night to help soothe your pain, doesn't seem to fit your editorial picture of a money-grabbing businessman, now does he? I'm sure, Andy, that when you're home on vacation, you're not going to let your economic theories stand in the way of your having a good time. But you know, around Monroe, you act kind of like a capitalist yourself. Seriously, Andy, I know that free enterprise doesn't make everyone's every meal a Sunday dinner. It can break down. But when we make it work, it gives us the highest standard of living on earth. For nowhere else in the world do so many people have so much of the good things of life. Maybe you'll find the answer sooner than I will, son. Me, I guess I know mostly what I print in the paper. But your mother and I went strolling over by the old grist mill last Sunday. That mill ground corn free of charge for Washington's army, but the farmers paid a fair price. And from the increase of his capital, the miller could build a home and rear his family and bequeath some money to help build the church. He's buried there now, along with the generations of townsmen, rich and poor, who shared a common faith in God and the American way. You are enrolled, son, without a license from any commissar, in a free and liberal institution, one like many in our land, which was founded on the generosity of men who had something to share. Notice on your way to class sometime how many buildings are there for your use, because someone was able and generous enough to fulfill a need of yours and your classmates. Might be interesting to know where the money came from that supports the scientific research being done on your own campus for the benefit of you and your posterity. Think how few of your classmates would be there at all if it weren't for endowed scholarships, and how many professors are holding academic chairs provided by private funds. The next time you go to the library for study or relaxation, or to do research for one of your blowtorch editorials, rummage around in the stacks and open a few books to their inside covers. Notice how many books have been donated by people who have given the richest gift of all, knowledge. These books are the wealth with which any man can be a capitalist. Invest your time in them and spend the dividends the rest of your life. Read them all, Karl Marx if you must, and be one of the first young liberals to be able to wade through the whole thing. And while you're at it, that other radical handbook, Mein Kampf. For remember, you're reading in a country where the police aren't interested in the title on the cover, as long as you don't block traffic. But don't close your mind to the spirit of your own proud land. Don't draw a voluntary iron curtain across your mind. Read Alexander Hamilton and the writings of Thomas Jefferson. Read the newspaper. Read the newspaper, front page, sport page, comic page, and editorials. And since you're already in the newspaper business, especially read the dictionary. I say this earnestly, son, because words are beginning to lose their meaning. Capitalist has become a dirty word. And the same thing is happening to liberal and democracy and peace. These words should be tools, and they're being used as weapons. Maybe when you're most confused, it'd help if you defined each of these words like this. the way we want to live in Monroe. Well, Monroe, or anybody's hometown, is really our country in microcosm. You see, it's not just your country, son. It's mine, too, and my grandchildren's, and their grandchildren's, and a lot of other people's. Remember that the next time you want to tear it apart and put it together again with slogans. Criticize it if you must, but improve it first. Make it better. Whatever you do, don't sell it short. Remember, this is your heritage from the past. This is your legacy to the future. This is America.
Marketplace, USA. Every hour of the day and night, somewhere in this country of ours, people are buying and selling things in markets. Some of them are familiar to most of us, like this open-air pushcart market in a big city. Some are less familiar. This wholesale flower market, for instance. Or this huge center where farmers bring their fruit and vegetables to sell to produce wholesalers. And some markets very few of us ever see at all. Such a marketplace is the Chicago Board of Trade, the biggest commodity exchange in the country. Here in the various pits on the trading floor, millions of bushels of wheat or corn, of rye, oats, or soybeans may change hands in just a matter of minutes. Now, of course, maybe you aren't interested in marketplaces. Maybe all this buying and selling doesn't affect you at all. In that case, you are like our friend, Mr. John W. Featherweight. Mr. Featherweight doesn't care about marketplaces, not even a little bit. Well, if the grain exchanges in Chicago, Kansas City, or Minneapolis, or the cotton exchanges in New York and New Orleans were to disappear in a cloud of smoke, he wouldn't give it a second thought. But perhaps you don't live on a desert island. Maybe you live in a city, or on a farm, or in a small town like this. If you do, you're more like another friend of ours, a young fellow who has a job running this grain elevator in Midvale, a town in central Illinois. Now, a grain elevator is really nothing more than a marketplace. But Charlie Vincent, who manages the elevator, never thought of it like that. He just bought the wheat and corn, the oats and soybeans that the farmers hauled to him, and then in turn he sold these crops to merchants, millers, and other processors. As for the larger marketplaces, the big commodity exchanges, Charlie hardly gave them a thought. He knew they were there, of course, but he never thought much about why they were there. Or at least he didn't until the fall of 1952, when the soybean crop was being harvested. The bean crop was moving in from the farms and into the elevators like Charlie's at Midvale. Truckload after truckload. A truck drives in. The tailgate is taken off. The front end of the truck is hoisted up, and the beans pour out, down through the grate and into the hopper to be carried up into the bins. That's the way it should be. But then something went wrong. A truck drove in. When its front was lifted, the beans poured out, but they didn't all go through the grate. Some of them began to pile up on top. The conveyor machinery had broken down. That meant repairs, a problem Charlie had to take to the men who owned the elevator.
So Charlie's story really begins with an important question from the chairman.
How much will the repairs cost, Charlie?
Well, I figure about $2,000. I've got the breakdown.
One more bill to pay. We'll be lucky to break even this year.
John, didn't the Great Northern Elevator Company offer to buy us out a few months ago?
They did. As far as I know, the offer still stands.
Well, I'm getting a little uneasy about this business. It's been 3 years since we made any kind of a real profit.
Yes, and we put it all into the new storage tanks. New scale, and fixing up the office.
Might have been better if we put some of that money to new machinery. It's getting pretty dilapidated.
That's just it. There's always something.
Well, there's certainly always a risk, and that's what worries me. The farmers expect us to buy their crops when they haul them into us, regardless of markets or prices.
I'd feel better if somebody else took over those risks.
I feel like you do, John. We've got a lot of capital tied up here. Repairs are always expensive. Why don't we take the Great Northern offer?
Now, wait a minute. Whoa. At least give me a chance to move out of my office.
We're not criticizing you, Charlie. The point is, I've got a hardware business, Albert's got his farm. We've all got full-time jobs to do. Maybe we were wrong in taking on this elevator. Maybe if we can't devote all of our time to it, we shouldn't devote any.
Isn't any money in the till anyway?
Look, if I can get the money, will you hold on?
What do you have in mind?
Well, I'll let you know. Give me a little time.
Charlie didn't have anything in mind. But when people in Midvale have trouble like that, money trouble, the first person they're likely to think of is Mark Latham, the president of the Midvale National Bank.
I wonder if I could see you for a minute. Well, this is important. Could I see you just for a minute tomorrow before you go to the bank? Well, I didn't mean to invite myself for breakfast. Sure. Swell, 8 o'clock. Okay, goodbye. I don't know what kind of security you want for a loan. We've got 10,000 bushels of beans in the elevator, and you're only lending us 50% on them. Now, if you could stretch a point and lend us 60%, we could go ahead and make the necessary repairs.
You know, the security we'd really like to have is for you fellows to operate in a little more business-like manner.
Us?
That's right.
What do you mean?
You take too many chances.
Are you serious?
Let me tell you the kind of a picture I see every time I think of your elevator. I see you buying beans, all the beans the farmers bring you. They expect you to buy them. It's your responsibility. Right now you have 10,000 bushels on hand. How much did you pay for them?
So far, they average $2.85 a bushel.
When you sell them to the crushers, you figure on making 7 cents a bushel, right?
That's our handling charge. That's what we hope to make.
So when I think of the storage bins, I don't think of the beans in them. I think of that 7 cents you should get on every bushel. On 10,000 bushels, that's $700. Lots of times you don't sell the beans right away.
That's right. The processors can't handle the whole crop at harvest time.
Suppose it's a big crop. What happens to the price then?
It goes down.
Okay, there's your elevator. Where you're storing $700. Now suppose that before you sell the beans, the price went down 7 cents. What would that do to your $700?
Wipe it out. Of course, there's a chance the price may go up.
Charlie, do you think any bank would be smart to lend money to a businessman who based his expectation of profit on chance alone?
Well, you have to take some risks in any business.
You certainly do, which is exactly why you shouldn't take any more than you have to. Incidentally, did you know that a lot of people in your line of business reduce their risk by taking out a kind of insurance against price changes?
Insurance?
That's right. It isn't the kind where you pay premiums and get a policy. I'll show you what I mean. Let's suppose you're in your office at the elevator. I'll make it a lot simpler than it is in actual practice, but the principle will be exactly the same. Suppose a man came into your office who was willing to buy those beans.
I hear you've got 10,000 bushels of beans.
That's right.
You want to sell them to me for $2.92 a bushel?
Sure. Where do you want them delivered?
Well, I don't. Not for 3 months, anyway.
Why?
Well, I figure the prices will go higher. Maybe I'll make a profit.
Maybe you won't.
That's right. Maybe I won't. But it's a risk I'm willing to take.
Okay. But if I hold them here at the elevator, I'll have to charge you storage.
Well, how's $2.97 a bushel then?
Well, that sounds fair enough. Let's see, that gives me a nickel storage from now to January, in addition to my regular 7-cent handling charge. All right.
Fine, let's draw up a contract.
On a contract like that, Charlie, you couldn't lose. If the price dropped, you could deliver beans on that contract and get your $2.97 a bushel. That's the kind of insurance I was talking about. A contract for future delivery. That's a futures contract.
Well, where do I find somebody that'll make that kind of a contract?
You don't have to find them. There are marketplaces like the Board of Trade in Chicago where people are always willing to buy or sell beans for future delivery. These are futures contracts. And when you sell a futures contract on such an exchange at a price that guarantees your handling and storage charges, you've hedged yourself against loss.
That's fine if I'm in Chicago.
You don't have to be in Chicago. You can handle it through a broker anywhere.
Do I have to ship the beans to Chicago?
Not necessarily. Most times your regular customers want the beans at their plants around here, not at Chicago. So they'll pay a price high enough to make it worth your while to sell to them here and buy back the beans you sold for future delivery.
Let's see if I've got this straight. When I buy beans at my elevator, I sell a futures contract for the same quantity.
That's right. That way you've protected yourself against loss while the beans are in your elevator.
And when I sell the beans out of my elevator, I buy the futures contract back.
Exactly. And while you hold the beans you sold the futures contract against, it doesn't matter which way the market moves, whether it goes up or down. Because most times cash prices and future prices move together. If the cash price goes down, you lose money when you sell for cash. But the future price will go down too. So you can buy your futures contract back at less than you got for it when you sold it. And you make a gain there that offsets what you lose on the cash beans. If the cash price goes up, you'll make money in the cash market. But you'll have to pay more for your futures contract when you buy it back than you got for it. Again, you should come out even. Either way the market goes, your operating profit is protected as long as you've got that futures contract.
It makes sense. It makes so much sense, and it's so simple it worries me I never understood it before.
Of course, that's the simplest kind of hedging. When you buy beans from a farmer, you sell an equal amount of futures. I'd feel safe in lending you up to 90% on all the beans you hedge that way, instead of the 50% I'm lending you now. That would give you more than the money you need for the repairs.
You know, a couple of years ago, when Sam Nelson was on the board of directors at our elevator, they did pass a resolution allowing the manager to hedge. Well, I never used the authority before because, frankly, I never understood what it was all about until now. None of the other directors seemed anxious for me to do anything about it.
Well, since you have that authority, I'll phone a broker I know in Chicago and tell him it's all right to go ahead.
Good. Let's do it now.
Okay. I'll put him on. You want to sell 10,000 January beans at the market?
Sure. Hello?
This broker will execute the order on the Chicago Board of Trade. Once he has taken your order, he calls his booth on the floor of the Board of Trade and tells them to sell 10,000 bushels of January beans for your account. The man in the booth gives the order to a messenger. The messenger takes it to one of the floor brokers at the bean pit. The broker makes the sale. These brokers are executing orders for thousands and thousands of people all over the country. Transactions involving millions of dollars are concluded by a simple hand signal. This marketplace keeps a record of all transactions. All price changes are recorded on this board for soybeans, wheat, corn, oats, and other commodities. And the quotations go out over the country on the Board of Trade ticker. Despite what may look like confusion to you and me, there is order and purpose behind everything that happens here. The most rigid law is one that is not in the book of regulations, the law of supply and demand. Marketplaces like this, where the law is allowed free play, are among the most important balance wheels of our national economy.
Oh, hello, John. Come on in.
I want to talk to you.
Sure, let's sit down.
What's this about your playing the market?
Me playing the market? Oh, you mean the bean futures I sold this morning? Well, that's all right. The board passed a resolution a couple of years ago.
I wasn't chairman then. I'm calling a meeting tomorrow to straighten this matter out.
Well, all I did was to protect us from a price drop. It was just an ordinary business transaction.
When you sell things you don't expect to deliver, that isn't an ordinary business transaction, and we don't want any part of it. I just stopped by to make that plain, and to tell you it'll be at the meeting tomorrow night to account for yourself. Good night.
Good night.
I invited myself to this meeting, and with your chairman's permission, 2 other men. Charlie here consulted me, and I advised him to act as he did in your interests. All you have done in selling a futures contract is to protect your handling and storage charges. Make sure that you get that money and not lose it if the prices drop.
That may be, but we don't want to put ourselves in the same class with those people up there on the Board of Trade who send grain prices up or down simply according to the way they gamble.
Well, John, I think you feel that way for a couple of reasons. First, I suspect you're thinking of some of the abuses that happened in the old days. That was before the exchanges established their present strict rules, and before the Commodity Exchange Act was passed. More important, I wonder if you've had a chance to hear the whole story of why we have these markets and what they do. If you did, I think you'd feel different about it. Gerald, will you come up here a minute? You all know Gerald is president of the Midvale Plow Company. He also happens to know more about commodity futures trading than anyone else in these parts.
John, I take it you think things would be better if there were no Board of Trade or any other commodity exchanges.
I think things would be more natural.
All right, I'll tell you what. Let's pretend you had your way. You and all the other people who think futures trading is wrong. Let's pretend there are no commodity exchanges in existence anymore. Let's say you waved a magic wand and that the exchanges all over the United States, in Chicago, Minneapolis, New Orleans, Kansas City, and New York, had simply vanished as of this minute. Let's see what things would be like tomorrow. Just to make it easier, let's use some imaginary labels. Soybeans aren't your primary business, John. So in this little story we're going to tell, you're going to play the part of the consumer. On the other hand, Albert over here is vitally concerned with soybeans. He grows them. Charlie Vincent is a middleman. He buys beans from the growers and sells them to the processors, so he can play himself. And now we've got to picture a couple of people who aren't here, although most of us know them. The first is Jack Simmons, manager of the Western Soybean plant in Cranford. At the moment, he's probably home reading the evening paper. But let's imagine that it's during business hours and he's at his desk. Jack is a processor. He buys beans and converts them into oil and meal. They go into hundreds of products. One of Jack's customers is Bill Fulton, general manager of American Foods, a manufacturer of shortening. Well, Bill completes our cast of characters. Now we begin our story. Remember, all this is going to take place on a day when there are no more commodity exchanges. Yesterday, they were all in existence and operating, but now, suddenly, they've disappeared. We'll start out on Albert's farm. It's a hot morning. The fields have dried off early, and they've got a good start combining the soybeans. Matter of fact, Albert is already headed off to town with the first truckload. When he gets his beans to the elevator, he expects Charlie to buy them, pay him good hard cash for them. On this particular day, business at the elevator is not running smoothly at all.
But you gotta have beans sometime, today, next week.
What's going on here?
Oh, that's the trouble. There's nothing going on.
Okay. I guess if you don't want them, you don't want them. Well, I suppose you want to sell me beans, too.
Well, why shouldn't I?
Well, I can't pay you a decent price for them. I don't know what I can get for them myself, so I have to play it safe.
Aren't the processors buying any beans?
Not any more than they have to. That was Jack Simmons I was just talking to.
What do you think we ought to do, Charlie?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I can take a few loads off of your hands, but I can't afford to pay you over $2.70.
Well, that's 15 cents less than we've been getting.
Yeah, I know. How do I know I can sell them? How do I know what I'll get for them?
Well, I suppose we can try some other elevator.
But we don't know what they're paying either.
Isn't there some place we can find out who's paying what?
Now, with the exchanges gone, you'll just have to make the rounds and ask. You can try phoning, but the lines are pretty busy. I tried that myself.
That's one important function the exchanges used to perform. They were clearinghouses of information, not only about the prices everybody was paying, but other things, such as volume of sales in various parts of the country and so forth. Inasmuch as we're imagining this, distance doesn't mean anything, so let's take Albert over to Cranford to talk to Jack Simmons. John, as a consumer, you'd better come along, too. You want to know why a usually active processor like Simmons has suddenly cut down his operation.
I can't afford to buy anywhere near the amount of beans I'd ordinarily be contracting for at this time of year.
You still have customers, haven't you?
Sure I have, but they're not all giving me orders right now. There's 2 pounds of Lincolns. How would you like to buy, say, 5 million times that many? That would be 80 carloads. I used to buy that many at one clip during our harvest.
Why aren't you doing it now?
For the simple reason that I can't protect myself by selling futures. If I were to buy 80 carloads of beans now, and the price went down 15 cents a bushel, I could lose about $25,000. When we had the futures market, I could protect myself against that. I could hedge.
What do you mean, hedge?
Every time I bought beans, I sold an equal amount on a futures contract. Then if the price of beans went up, I made money on the beans I already had, but I'd lose about an equal amount on the futures contract when I bought it back. If the price of beans went down, I'd lose money on my cash beans, but I'd make a profit on my futures. All in all, I'd come out just about even. It was a form of insurance.
And you can't do that now?
Not with the futures markets gone. Now, if I buy more beans than I actually need, I take a big inventory risk. So I'm only buying the beans I need for orders on hand.
But the chain of trouble doesn't end with Simmons. When Simmons buys on a hand-to-mouth basis, manufacturers like Bill Fulton over at American Foods have their troubles too. Let's see the kind of situation Fulton might well find himself in a couple of months from now.
I think 10 tank cars of soybean oil will hold me.
Aren't you cutting it a little thin? You always used to keep a 30-day supply on hand or on contract, just for your own safety. Even with this new order, you won't have 2 weeks' supply.
I know it.
Suppose we have a plant breakdown. Suppose we can't get the cars to you just when you want them. Suppose you want to step up your own operation. You could get caught short.
Don't think I don't worry about that. But what can I do?
You could take 30 tank cars.
Suppose I do. Suppose there's an oil price drop. A big drop. You're going to refund me the difference?
You know I can't do that.
In the old days, I could hedge. Didn't mind taking on a big contract from you. When I could sell futures against that oil, I knew I wouldn't lose if the price broke. Could buy the futures back at an offsetting profit, and now when I...
Now, if you carry a big inventory, you're really taking a risk.
I sure am, and someday I'd get caught. If I'm going to operate that way, I'll just have to raise the price on my shortening. Build up a little backlog of profit to cover my risks.
So you're going to stand on 10 tank cars?
Yes. Remember, I've got no surplus now.
I'll keep those cars rolling to you on schedule, Bill.
Well, Jack, maybe you'd better make that 30 cut. Stop Jack Simmons and ask him to come back. Jack! I simply can't operate on a narrow margin like that. I guess maybe you better give me 30 cars. I'll just have to raise the price on my shortening to cover the risk.
Notice how the word risk keeps coming back into the conversation. Risk is inherent in every kind of business. And the greater the risk a businessman has to take, the greater the profit margin he has to allow himself to guard against it. And who pays for it in the end?
They've raised the price again. That's 3 cents more than it was last time.
And so the chain that started with lower prices to the farmer ends with higher prices to the consumer. It seems unfair that these people should have to suffer, but all along the line, the processors and distributors have to protect themselves. They have to have a wider margin of profit or go out of business. And this can only mean lower prices to the farmer or higher prices to the consumer, or both. Now we come back to your original point, John. You said things would be more natural without the exchanges.
Well, I guess I'll have to admit that maybe being natural isn't such a good idea in this case.
But you see, this story we've been imagining isn't really natural at all. When we eliminated futures trading, we eliminated one of the most natural things in the world, the willingness of some people to assume risks in the hope and expectation of profit. People like myself, people with enough money to afford it, and the time to study conditions so that they can cut their risks to a minimum. Well, Mark, I guess that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Gerald. I'd like to add one more thing here, if I may. People like Gerald Carmel are vitally important to the commodity markets. He's a speculator. A speculator's a man who deliberately decides to take a risk for the sake of making a profit, if his judgment proves right. Without him, you wouldn't be able to hedge. Now, when you want to buy futures to protect yourself, you've got to find someone else willing to sell them. Now, that somebody else might be another person like yourself who is using the futures market to hedge his position. But the buy orders and the sell orders don't always balance themselves perfectly. And that's where the speculator comes in. It's his willingness to buy or sell, his willingness to take the risk you want to dispose of, that keeps the market fluid and the prices steady.
Well, Mark, how long has this business of buying and selling futures been going on?
Well, I'm going to pass that one because we have a professional question answer here tonight. I asked Joe Goodwin to come down from Chicago. Joe represents the brokerage firm that handled your hedging order yesterday. Joe, would you mind taking over for a while?
Well, I'll do my best to answer your questions. As a matter of fact, I have brought along a sort of basic answer book. How to buy and sell commodities. And I'll leave copies for whoever wants them. Now, as for your question, sir, there's nothing new about buying and selling futures. That's been going on in this country for about 100 years. And it was way back then that the Board of Trade, our first commodity exchange, got started. And it came into existence because it had to. Because this nation of ours is, in effect, one enormous marketplace. Now, the story you've been imagining might just as well have been about wheat, or oats, or corn. Of course, there are other commodities besides grain. There's cotton. There are even exchanges where your coffee is traded, and the sugar you put into it. And the butter and eggs you eat. In all, there are 14 commodity future exchanges around the United States, and 29 commodities are traded on them. Now, those commodities are handled at less cost on the average than are other commodities not traded on futures exchanges. Why? Because both the buyer and seller at every stage can protect themselves against price changes. Now, many times the hedging problem facing some manufacturer or processor or distributor is a tough one. But when I'm stumped, I'm never more than a minute away from the specialists of our headquarters organization. Men who know each of the markets thoroughly and know how they can be used advantageously. And now, if there are any more questions.
Hello.
Oh, hi. Well, you can relax. I've still got a job.
I wasn't worried about that.
They finally admitted I was right.
About everything?
Everything. From now on, we'll be hedging all our beans. That's policy.
Wonderful.
Say, I've got an idea. Let's celebrate. We can't do anything at the elevator tomorrow because the parts won't be there yet.
Let's drive up to Chicago for the day.
Okay, but why Chicago?
I just had a call from John Clay.
John Clay?
He thinks you know so much about commodity markets, you ought to go up and see one.
Here in this vast country are a multitude of individuals, all with preferences in the kinds and cuts of meat they like to eat. Their preferences are influenced by many things, among which are the traditions and customs of the section in which they live. In Boston, this meat dealer's showcase in normal times is filled with the appetizing cuts of meat Boston people like. He knows by experience what their preferences are. West across the country, a Kansas family is enjoying meat for supper obtained from their local butcher, who knows the kind of meat they prefer. Down in Houston, Texas, the local meat dealers know the meat buying customs of people down there. All over the country, customs influence the kinds of meat people like for breakfast, dinner, and supper. All these preferences are satisfied through the extensive and efficient marketing methods of the modern meat packer. His experience has helped to develop a marketing system that satisfies the many wants of consumers. But it wasn't always this way. Let's go back to a farm of 60 years ago and see how all this started. The farmer of those days usually prepared the carcass himself. Even in those early days, he may not have done this, but not having the modern transportation methods that are available today, he took it to the nearest town by whatever means he had. There he sold it to the local butcher. Naturally, the cuts of meat that people liked best in that town were sold first and brought the most money. To move the balance while fresh, the remainder sold at a reduction price. This resulted in a lower average price to the farmer. In those days, the price the farmer received for his livestock was governed only by what the local meat dealer could get for the cuts of meat. The retailer was not at fault. It was a case of not having a satisfactory meat marketing system. Let's look at an example to explain just what that means. Here are two towns. We will call them Town A and Town B. Actually, the towns are far apart. Town A, where lived the farmer and butcher we just met, sold these cuts readily. Town B could have used the remainder and perhaps would have paid a better price than was obtained for it in Town A. Neither the farmer nor the retailer could bring about a matching of supply and demand for the various cuts. Out of necessity, there developed the meat packer, who could perform the job of giving both towns the cuts of meat each of them wanted. The result? A better average price for the entire carcass and more money to the producer for his livestock. As the years went by, the job of the meat packer became more complex. The widening distance between the main livestock producing areas and the main meat consuming areas developed to the point where it is now more than 1,000 miles on the average between the producers of livestock and the consumers of meat. It is necessary for the meat packer to know the preferences of consumers all over the country. For example, what Mrs. Boston wants in the way of lamb, what Mrs. New York demands in beef, and what the various Mrs. Atlantas, Galvestons, and San Franciscos prefer in kinds, types, and grades of the meat they serve. It is the meat packer's job to cater to these preferences or customs, to give the consumer what she wants when she wants it. Studies of the meat buying preferences of the nation reveal that customs have an important influence on the marketing and consumption of meats. One of the best examples of customs in the meat business is the preference in different parts of the country for meats from different weights of animals. The cuts of beef preferred by Boston people come from animals weighing about 1,300 pounds. New York's preference is from cattle of 1,100 to 1,200 pounds of weight.
Washington, D.C. people like beef from cattle weighing 1,000 to 1,100 pounds. As we go west, the demand is for beef from lighter weight cattle. This is true as we move progressively through Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and farther west. In Chicago, the livestock capital of the world, the demand for beef is from lighter weight cattle and to the east of it. St. Louis's preference for beef is from cattle ranging from 600 to 700 pounds. The Midwestern area from the Dakotas to Texas and also to the south, with the exception of Florida, likes its meat from 600 to 800 pound cattle. Farther west, the preference for beef is from cattle a little heavier than in the Middle Western region. To summarize the influence of the weight differences, compare the little steer weighing 600 to 700 pounds, preferred in St. Louis, with the big steer weighing about 1,300 pounds, which furnishes the beef that is preferred in Boston. The livestock buyer for the meat packer, when buying live cattle, looks at them from the viewpoint of the weight and quality of the ribs, loins, rounds, and other cuts they will produce. This is because meat dealers and their customers in various sections of the country have different preferences, and their preferences must be satisfied. We have seen how customs influence the demand for beef from cattle of different weights. Now let's have a look at some other factors which affect meat buying customs, such as taste, buying power, weather and seasons, religious beliefs, and so forth. Taste is a thing that is hard to define. Still, it has a big influence on what people choose, as long as they have the money to satisfy the preferences. Boston people want their beef, lamb, and pork to come from the heavier animals, which naturally carry more fat. In the South, many of the famous meat dishes are composed of lean meats, which are combined with highly seasoned gravies and sauces. In the Southwest, hot tamales, chili con carne, and barbecue sauces are very popular. Another influence on meat buying customs is buying power. In other words, the money that people have to spend for meat. If John Smith wants steak for supper, and steak costs more than Mrs. Smith can pay, Mr. Smith gets nourishing pot roast. Weather and seasons also affect the kind of meat people will buy. When the weather gets hot, the women who do most of the buying of foods are not as willing buyers of roasts as they are of steaks and chops, unless the prices on roasts are low enough to be attractive. On the other hand, when it's cooler, appetites are bigger, and housewives do not object to spending time around the kitchen stove. Roasts, boiling meats, and stews become more popular than during hot weather. Retail dealers in the large consuming centers report that their trade falls off whenever rain, sleet, or snow make it difficult for housewives to get out. Religious beliefs affect meat consumption on a national scale. On Fridays, certain days during Lent, and on other days throughout the year, large portions of our population do not eat meat. Another example of the effect of religious beliefs is that because of certain dietary customs, Orthodox Jewish people do not eat pork. To satisfy these variable factors of preference, weights and cuts, tastes, buying power, weather and seasons, and religious beliefs was one of the reasons the national marketing system of the meat packer came into existence. Because the meat packer knows the meat buying customs of consumers all over the United States, and because he has the modern marketing system to meet those customs, livestock producers receive a higher level of prices for their livestock.
Hello, Mr. Kearns.
Good to see you, Andy. What's up?
Well, I just stopped by to tell you I'm not going to be able to take that job you offered me here.
Why not, Andy?
I just can't.
Check the oil?
Yes, please.
I figured what we talked about might work into a pretty good deal for you.
Thanks, Mr. Kearns, but I'm leaving town. In fact, I'm on my way right now. Goodbye.
Well, okay. That'll be $2.80. Leaving town? Why?
I'm sick of this place. I want to go where I can make some real money.
Hi, Joe. About a mile up, the road's washed out. Completely blocked off.
Yeah?
You mean we can't get through, officer? Raise your right, mister. Anyone heading in that direction better hang around here for a while. Be very long? We're working on it. Joe, I'll let you know when the road's open. Okay.
Folks welcome to wait inside. You might be more comfortable.
Yes, thank you.
I can't get through down there, Joe. I want to use your phone. Okay.
This Andy you were talking with, like so many boys today, it's hard for him to settle down to something steady.
I know, but this kid has a lot in the ball. Just let me show you his car. You'll see what I mean.
Hello, Jackson. This is Bill Marshall. Yeah. Look, I'm stuck down here near the side of the wharf.
Looks a little battered up on the outside, but how about that motor, huh?
It's really a beaut. Special job, isn't it?
Kid put it together himself.
You don't say.
Now you can see why I offered him a job.
Yeah, I certainly can.
I could add a tune-up service around here.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a young fellow wanting to look around for greener pastures.
No.
But you hate to see them run off with just some vague notion of stumbling on a pot of gold at the foot of a rainbow.
That's right.
Thanks, Joe. I had to phone the shop at Stardale to wait open for me. I need a heavy-duty valve bad. Well, I better try and get around that washout.
Good luck.
I just saw that motor you built, young man. I should think anybody who could do work like that ought to be able to make a pretty good living. Especially in the community where he's already got a lot of connections.
Connections? Fat lot of good they've done me so far.
Now, just a minute, Andy. You know I offered you a job and a darn good one. Fact is, I need you. You see, there's a new service station going up right over the crossroads there. And I'm going to have real competition.
And plenty of it.
Son, you're talking to a man who's comfortably retired on the benefits of competition.
Lights. Folks, I'll have a lamp on in just a minute. There, that ought to do.
Well, this is really quite pleasant. I haven't seen a lamp like that in years.
It takes me back a long, long ways. Andy here started me thinking about the time I was a young man myself with no definite future in mind. And that lamp's a lot like one I remember that used to be in old man Cooper's drugstore. Cooper's was the only drugstore in town. It had made Cooper pretty independent, knowing he had the local business all to himself. Service was a joke, and that was about the best way to take it. But that night, it was a little different with me. I wasn't in any mood to be amused.
Have a chair, Fred. You're making me nervous.
It just so happens that I'm in sort of a hurry.
Yeah, well, haste makes waste, son.
My mother is not...
Oh, she had rheumatism again?
Now, see here, Mr. Cooper. I want a bottle of Esme's elixir, and I want it right now.
Well, I reckon you know where it is better than I do. Besides, I'm busy. That'll be $1.80.
What? It was only $1.60 before.
Yeah, prices are going up.
You mean you're putting them up?
Young man, anytime you don't like the way I do business, you can trade somewhere else.
He had me there, of course. If I wanted the medicine, I had no choice but to pay his price and get out. Funny how little things change the whole course of your life. You're going along with your head down, and all of a sudden you look up, and you're at a crossroads. On the way home that night, an idea exploded inside of me. Start a new drugstore. I didn't tell anybody about my brainstorm but Martha here. She knew what I wanted.
It was just his idea that he needed money to marry me. I was willing all the time, even though he was only working in the mills then.
Yep. 3 nights a week, I took the train to Springfield for a course in pharmacy. The other 4 nights, I studied till after midnight. Like most ideas that really pay off, mine required a good foundation first. It was a full 3 years before the fateful morning finally arrived. I was as nervous as a cat on a hot griddle. Come right in, folks. We're ready for business. Well, sir, they were really astonished when they saw the ice cream soda fountain, showcases with the cosmetics and toilet articles. Certainly looked a lot different from Cooper's. Most of them had come out of curiosity, just to look around. But some stayed to buy. That'll be 75 cents. Thank you. Anything I can do for you, Mr. Cooper?
It looks like I wandered into an ice cream parlor by mistake. Or maybe a ladies' beauty parlor.
Mr. Cooper, there are 2 drugstores in town now. I aim to treat my customers the best way I know how. Give them higher quality and better service.
Now, let me tell you something, Buster. I'm going to give you a run for your money because I'm going to make a lot of changes and have a right smart drugstore myself.
The way it worked out, competition was healthy for Cooper as well as for me. We kept trying to give the people something better. It actually benefited both of us in the town, too.
It was different back in those days. A guy had a chance then.
But today, there are more opportunities than I ever dreamed of.
Then why don't I find myself something someplace?
Me? I'm sort of in the same situation as that old man Cooper. Not that this place is anywhere near as bad off as you say his was, but with a super service station going in across the way, I've got to do some things around here, too. Expand every way I can. Like going ahead with that motor tune-up deal I talked to Andy about. Give good, complete, all-around service. That's the answer.
Can I fill her up? This will probably be a blow to you, but I just stopped for a cigarette.
Oh, that's okay, but the way you're headed, the road's washed out.
Oh, brother.
Those people in there are in the same fix. Why don't you join them?
Okay, deal me and I'll pull on over.
Right over there. All right, go ahead. reasons for expanding the station. Make more room for people when the road's blocked.
You handle the 20?
Yes.
Say, business must be good.
Storm kept me from taking the weekend receipts to the bank. Tell me you didn't get around that washout.
No, but that valve I need. I talked to the guy stuck on the other side and they're going back and getting it for me. I'm going to meet him later at the roadblock. Well, I'll stick around here for a while if you don't mind.
Mr. Marshall and I are sort of in the same business, just different ends. Retail's mine, production's his. He just did something that nobody ever did in these parts before. He struck oil.
Struck oil? Boy, that's the kind of luck I'd like to hit all of a sudden. So you think I was lucky, huh? Well, weren't you? For the past few weeks, that's all I've heard. Luck, luck, luck. Not only him, but practically everybody seems to think that striking oil is something that just happens. A lucky break, like finding a diamond ring while you're picking dandelion. I'd say you did just that. You know, it burns you up. After all you've been through, you want to try and pound what it's really like into some people's heads. I feel I earned what I got the hard way. My break was a long time coming, son. It isn't easy to find oil. It's even tough to find a place that looks like oil land. I'd been wrong plenty of times before, but I had a certain peculiar feeling about this last place, so I made a deal with the owner of the land. He thought I was crazy. Nobody else had ever figured there was oil there, and I wasn't too sure myself. But you can't just play hunches. You have to have facts. So you study the geology of the ground, see if it looks like any other oil land you've ever seen. You prowl around, getting yourself a lot of samples of rock. Finally, maybe you find a shell fossil that gives you a real clue. At least, enough so it's worth taking the next step. Then, with a little bit of dynamite, you set off some charges under the ground. Vibrations of the explosions are picked up on a seismograph, the same as with an earthquake. The seismograph records give you a picture of what it's like under the ground. And from this, you can tell whether there's even a chance for oil down there. Next, you make a survey to pinpoint the particular spot where you want to drill. Then you're ready to get your derrick up. Oh, sure, to other people, they seem to spring up overnight, but it's not that simple. A lot of work, a lot of dollars, a lot of engineering knowledge is represented in what you finally see towering against the sky. You check your equipment, all the chains and cables and all the various drill bits, a different type for cutting through all kinds of layers you may run into below, sand or rock, and you have to be prepared for anything, everything. You take delivery on your pipe and it looks like miles of it. You never know how much you'll need because you never know how deep you'll have to go. So you start drilling. And that's an experience like nothing else in the world. You'd have to go through it to know all the heartbreak. And the more you know about drilling, the more you worry. It takes money, men, machinery, patience, sweat, and guts. And of certain things, like money, you've only got so much. There's so many things can go wrong, so many risks. And you know that wildcatting this kind of an operation, the odds are 8 to 1 against you. Yep, 8 to 1 that you'll go broke.
you've sunk your every cent into this, but that's not all. Everything you've learned in your years in the oil business, all you know and all you believe in, your brains and heart and soul are in that long, dark, narrow hole in the ground. Day and night you drill. You remember all those other times you've come up with nothing. Went broke. Had to go back to drilling for somebody else till you could accumulate enough cash to try again. On your own. But still you go on. Even when you know you only have enough money left to drill 10 more feet. Just those 10 feet further. Then, unless you hit it, you're through. With just another one of thousands of dry holes. When you get the final answer, too much has gone out of you in the long, tough pull for you to have much feeling left, one way or the other. At last, a lump of mud, oily, success. Well, when you hit oil in a new part of the country, a lot of oil company representatives come flocking to bid for drilling rights on all the surrounding land, public or private, just on the strength of one well coming in. Because with the demand for oil growing all the time, new producing areas have to be found. And when you're the fellow who brought in the first well, there's a lot of satisfaction knowing that you've helped change a backwater village into a town that's really going places. Of course, crude oil itself can't be used for anything the way it comes out of the ground. It has to be pumped through pipelines to the refineries where it is processed. And all the time, oil company laboratories are working toward the future. You see, there are thousands of privately managed competing oil companies trying to beat each other to supply better products for the consumer. Well, I guess that brings us back to here. Where pretty soon now, your jobber might, just might be bringing you oil and gas right out of my well. Could be. Who knows?
Everyone around here is pretty excited. Things are going to really boom.
It seems to me this is a pretty good place for anybody looking for a start.
If there's going to be so much money floating around here, how do I get some of it? What am I supposed to do now? Open up a drugstore or start drilling for oil?
Well, I think this man's just too modest to come right out and say it, but I think the point's simply this, young man. There are definite rewards for individual initiative and determination, patience and courage.
Yeah, sure, I know. I've been hearing that Horatio Alger stuff till it bounces off my ears. Office boy to president. You, too, can own a big convertible and marry the boss's daughter. Well, that isn't the way it works, see? You get out of high school, you get a measly little job for a few bucks a week. You work hard, and every night you think, well, it won't be long now before they give you that promotion and that raise. If the raise is big enough, maybe you can even get married, who knows? Yeah, your dream is big, and you work hard. At the end of 6 months, who gets the promotion and the raise? Not you. They give it to the boss's nephew. On top of all that, your girl goes off with some other guy. Nobody knows where his money comes from, but he wears $125 suits and he drives a fancy convertible. You get a raw deal like that, you wise up fast. You find out you're wasting your time trying to make it the hard way.
I know how hard it is to keep on believing in the right when you see people all around you doing wrong and profiting by it. You lose faith in the very things that made our country great. That's what's happened to a lot of people these days. Don't let it happen to you, Andy. If I hadn't so much faith myself, I'd get frightened at how corrupt some people in this country have become. Don't let them mislead you. Don't let it happen to you. You've got to keep faith in certain things, no matter what happens. Faith in God, and faith in your country, and faith in yourself. Because if we ever lose that faith, our way of life will be lost, too.
Good night.
Oh, now how do we tell when the road's open again?
Oh, the highway patrol will come along.
That's something I don't think I'll wait for. All right, line up over there. Not you, kid. Now, would you citizens like to shower down whatever cash and jewelry you happen to have with you, or do I have to take it away from you? You and I seem to think alike, kid, along lines of getting ahead. You ought to have a pretty good chance right here. The guy that just struck oil, the owner here with a wad that could choke a horse, and the dignified couple that look as though they ought to be pretty comfortably fixed. I can use you, and I'm offering you a break. Frisk these solid citizens for me, and you can be well on your way to that big convertible. Come on, kid, we haven't got all night. Nice going, kid.
Lucky, no bones hit. All you'll have is a stiff arm for a few days.
I better get back on the job. You're gonna be all right, kid. It's a good boy, Joe.
I have an idea we're all going to be better for what happened here tonight.
Mr. Kearns, I've been thinking about that job. I was wondering if...
It's still yours, Andy. A salary, and after tonight, what do you say to a nice bonus on any business you bring in?
We hope to hear great things of you, Andy. You have it coming to you.
Come back and see us in a few months. We'll have everything.
Yes, ma'am. It'll be as nice a service station as you'll find at any crossroads in the good old USA.